Hey, Troy Howard Middle School. This is Mr. Groening again with another video for you for an enrichment activity. Today I'm shooting from my home shop. You can see me in my basement here. I've got a couple of woodworking projects, simple ones that you can try at home. Doesn't take a lot of tools, just and a couple pieces of small wood, not as much as the birdhouse did. Sorry about the light on my head here. I'm trying to light the area that I'm working in here, but so what we're going to make today are a couple of small options for two different designs for a tablet or a phone holder. You can use either one, or one's a little bit more challenging, the other one's a little simpler, but I'm going to demonstrate both. It shouldn't take too long. What I have here on this clipboard are the measurements from one of them that we're going to make. And you can see here we're using pine again, and you're going to need a piece of pine, about 1x4 piece of pine, which is, remember, 1x4 is not actually 1 inch by 4 inches. It's only 3/4 by 3.5 inches. But you're going to need 2 pieces of that. And these are rough measurements. These are ones that I thought would work well. You need one longer piece, 8 inches long, and then a shorter piece, 5 inches long. So if you have a piece of wood, you can go ahead and cut those. And you can see we have some notches that are going to go in there, and the measurements for the notches are right there. We're going to come up 1.5 inches on both of these. Actually, the notches are going to be pretty much the same from one end of the board, and they're going to notch together. So it's going to be a little piece of furniture, I guess, that you can use to hold your tablet or your phone, but it comes apart. You can break down, so if you want to store it. So I'll go ahead and get started. But the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to turn the camera down here a little bit so you can see. I'm going to cut a piece of wood, and I've got a little bit different clamping set up here so that you guys could see a little bit better, but you can use whatever clamps you have available. I've got, you got seat clamps, wood clamps, things like that, whatever you can use to clamp it to the edge of a table or a workbench. So here's my piece of 1x4 pine. It's already the length that we need for the 2 pieces, so it's 8 and 5, 13 inches, so we just need to cut the 5-inch piece off. It's always good to cut the little piece off in this case, because otherwise we might have a hard time kind of trimming it the other way. So I'm going to measure and mark. So I've got my tape measure. Looks like the board is good on both ends, so I'm just going to measure and mark the length that we need, which we're going to be using a 5-inch piece. So remember, from the birdhouse we mark along the edge, and just a little mark like that. We don't make a line just yet, because it wouldn't be very accurate. So that's why we use the square. A tri-square or one of these speed squares will work, or a combination square. Any type of square will work. They even have saws that have squares built into them. But if we watch, I don't know if you guys can see, I hope you can see, turn that down a little bit. The square always goes against the edge, and we use that to make our line, just like that. And that's where we're going to make our cut right there. So I'm going to clamp this to the edge of the table. Clamp handy here somewhere. Where is it? Oh, here it's right. Okay, my clamp. So trying to do this so you can see it. You could probably find a better way to clamp some of the things that you're going to work on, but I want you guys to be able to see it in my camera. So any kind of handsaw should work for this. I chose just a little similar to what I used for the birdhouse one, but something with a little bit smaller teeth, so it made a little bit smoother cut, because we don't want it to be too rough. Remember, with the handsaw, make sure you start down at the heel of the saw, and we start by pulling back just to get a cut started. Really, the cutting happens when you push forward, but we start by pulling back, and then to follow that line, we try to stand behind the saw so we can sight the cutting. Remember, when we get near the end here, we don't want to break it off. We want to cut it cleanly. So we support it and then take small strokes. There we go. Okay. So there are our 2 pieces that we're going to need. We're going to need our both these pieces should be 5 and then 8, which is what we have here. All right, now this is where it gets a little bit trickier. If you remember from our plan here, we've got a couple of notches. The notches we said are 1.5 inches from one end of each board, and they're halfway in on the board there. So you're going to have to do a little bit of math to figure that out, what half of the width of this board is. Remember, the board is 3.5 inches, so figure that out, and then you'll know that measurement. The thickness of that notch is going to be the same thickness as the wood. So I'll show you how to lay that out, and then I'll show you how to cut it. So we'll start with the small one, and we said our notch is 1.5 inches from one end. So I'm going to measure and just put a mark at 1.5 inches right there. And I'm going to use my square and turn that into a nice straight line, just like that. We don't need to go all the way across because our notch isn't going all the way across. Our notch, we said, is halfway across the board, and we said that you got to figure out some math. So we have a 3.5 inch board. Half of that is it's 1 3/4 inches. So we'll go 1 3/4 inches and put a mark there, and that's where our notch is going to stop. Now the width of that notch, since this board is going to end up going through that notch, we can use this as a way to make that other line. So I've got this side here. I've got that line right on the edge of the board, and I just turn it this way and hold it as straight as I can and use the board as like a straight edge, like that, and make our line, okay? And then we need a line across here, so we can use our square for that as well. You can just carefully square that up like that. So we're going to be, you can see that, we're removing this wood in that notched area there. So let me erase that extra line there so you guys can see a little bit better. So to remove that wood, what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 cuts. We're going to make a cut here and then a straight cut here, and then we're going to remove that center piece. Since the grain is going in this direction, it should remove pretty easily. It'll split right with the grain. But one of the things that's not a bad idea to do is to transfer those marks to the opposite side of the board so you can see that you're following. You're going to cut to the right length and width for that notch. So I'm going to use that square, and you can do this or not, but I think it's more accurate to have more lines to do this. And then at 1 3/4 inches, we need our other mark right there. Okay. So that's where our saw blade is going to stop. We're going to cut straight down until we get to that line on both sides, and then we're going to remove that material. So I've got this little clamp set up for me so that you guys can see how this is going to work. I'm just going to tighten this up, make sure I have some room here, and I'm going to use the saw now on the edge of the board, and I'm going to cut right down on that line. It's okay if you cut it a tiny bit big. We don't want to have to go back and trim it later if it's too small. That would be hard to do. The same thing, I'm going to start by drawing the blade back. Follow that line all the way down. How are we doing on this side? Not too bad. This is where we kind of need to see both sides. A little bit squeakiness, and that's it. And then we do the same thing on this side. We've got to be kind of gentle with this because we don't want that to split off, either piece to split off just yet. Yeah, bounce it off a little bit. There we go. Looks like we're almost there on that side. Alright, so now, as we said, we want to remove that piece. We could just break it off, but we want a cleaner cut there. So we're going to use a new tool here. You see our cuts there, well, we have to remove it right there. We're going to use a chisel, wood chisel right here. You can see a wood chisel. And this chisel has a pretty sharp blade on it. It's got a bevel blade, the handle. It's got a metal thing on the end of it, so that means you can use a metal hammer to hit that if you needed to hit a chisel with a chisel handle. Whatever that handle's made out of is what you hit it with. If it's a wooden handle chisel, you should hit it with a wooden mallet. Okay, if it's metal on there like that, you can use metal. So I'm going to take this chisel. It's about the same width of that notch right there, but I'm not going to break it off from this side because I'll show you why. I'm just going to tap that just to kind of score it. Make a little mark. If we broke that off on this side, there's a good chance it probably wouldn't break on our line, but if we score it first, then break it, we got a better chance of having it break on that line. Scoring it, we're just basically making a weak spot where we're trying to make the wood break off. So we'll keep doing that a little bit until it should snap right off there. If it doesn't, you can just probably break it off by hand. There we go. See how that popped right off of there, that piece. It's going to be a little rough in here, but with a chisel, if you happen to have a chisel, you can go back and you can kind of clean that up a bit. If you don't have a chisel, it's actually possible to use something else to get this out of there. You could use if you were really careful, you could use a sharper, like a screwdriver, even a flat screwdriver. Not recommended, but it's in a pinch you can do that. You could also do some filing in here as well. So we've got that piece all ready to go. And we're going to basically duplicate that notch onto this piece here. So assuming we did a good job cutting that, we should be able to just trace that notch on there. And we'll have our two notches that hopefully fit together. So we're just going to go back and trace and repeat our same procedure. Actually, I probably should transfer that again so I can see how deep we need to go. That seemed to work out pretty well. And like that. Bring that line around. And that one there. Mostly we just need the bottom line, which is that 1 3/4 inches, which is right there. Here's my square again here. All right, there we go, more notching. This out of the way. This is a little tricky, getting it started on the end like this. See, I'm using my thumb to keep it bouncing around a little bit. Now we're getting on that side, almost there. This side. Looking pretty good. Now we can go back and do our chiseling technique. There we go. Pop right out of there. Some of that extra. Let's see how we did. Should go right together here, just like that. Okay, now we've got a little stand. Put your anything on there. You can put a tablet on there. You can put a phone on there or whatnot, and it comes apart. so you can store it. What I would do with this, and I'll show you, talk more about that in a minute, but it's just do some sanding on it, put some finish on it, make it look nice, get rid of all the rough edges. Easy to get sandpaper, pretty cheap, you can get it anywhere. You might have some kicking around. If you don't have sandpaper, you can use, if you have a file at home or something like that. But, so that's the one design. The only thing about this design, I like it, but there's no provision for a charger. So that's why I came up with another design that's very similar. And that on this one here, we have a provision for a charger to go on this. Let's get this one out of the way. So this one, it's similar, but we have a few more notches, different types of notches to make. So with this one here, you can see 2 pieces of wood. It's a little bit bigger. We're using 1x5 pine now. 1x5 is 3/4 by 4.5 inches. And you can see our measurements for our notches. They're very similar, but now we have 2 notches in the long board. And then the short board right here has a larger notch in it like that, and you'll see how that's going to give us the provision for our charger, the way this thing goes together. So that's 4.5 by 4.5, so with basically a square piece of that pine. If you're using 1x5 or something close to it, it should work out based off of those measurements there. So let's see what that's going to look like. We've got a board right here. We'll go ahead and measure and cut that. We said we needed 9 inches plus a 4.5. So I'm just going to cut my 4.5 inch piece off of this, and we're going to, whatever length we end up with here, it doesn't really matter. It just makes the back of it a little bit higher, and you can make adjustments on that. But we kind of do need to make this 4.5 the way this is going to work. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut that just like I did before. And like I said before, also cut the smaller piece. It's a little bit easier to manage that way. I can smell that one. That one's got a sappy smell. Pine has a little sap in it. This one is especially sappy. All right, so we'll start with the small one first, I guess, like we did before. So we basically everything's 1.5 inches from one end for our notch. So we do our measuring, and we have to actually orient the grain. If we want this piece to break out of there, we want the grain going in this direction. If we run the grain this way, we wouldn't be able to chisel that. We'd have to use another technique to remove that wood. So make sure your grain is going this way, like that, on here. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I lay it out that way. That's important. Otherwise, you might have some problems. So we're gonna have 1.5 inches, and then another 1.5 inches, and then at the end, we have our 1.5 inches. It's 4.5 inches divided by 3. Each section is 1.5 inches. Works out really well. So take our square, make a line, random length at this point, and make that depth of that notch is the same. It's going to be 1.5 inches as well. So we just need to mark that. A little mark right there. Use the square. And there it is. All right, back to our notching technique. And we probably should mark that, at least the depth on that, shouldn't we? So we're 1.5 inches on this side so we can go the right depth. I'm going to take a chance that I can follow the line without making lines on both sides. All right, here we go. All right. And I didn't make the line on the top either. the same on this side. You got to be careful not to break any of the saw. Okay, now same procedure with the chisel. Same procedure with the chisel here, if you guys can see okay. And there's my hammer right in front of me. Score it and then snap it off. See if that works. Make sure we don't want to force it. There it goes. Okay. There we go. And again, we could probably file that out, clean that out a bit. So that's our short piece, shelf piece, and then the other one here is right here. You can see that's the 9-inch piece. See our notches are 1.5 inches deep, 1.5 inches up from the bottom, and the thickness across the notch is going to be the thickness of the wood. So let's go ahead and lay that out. So if we go 1.5 inches up from the bottom, we put a mark. Now we can actually make a line all the way across because we have 2 notches, one on each side. And if we use the same line, same mark, we know it's going to be pretty accurate. And we can also use our piece of wood here, same thickness, and use that like we did on the first one to mark the other side of the notch. Now all we need to do is mark the depth of the notch. And we said that depth, upside down, that depth is 1.5 inches. It's going to accommodate actually that right there. So we want to make sure, actually we can just use this. Why don't we do that? We'll just mark it off of this. You guys can see that I'm marking across the middle there. Like that. And then we're going to be, this is a good idea to do, make sure you don't remove the raw material. We're just going to remove those 2 pieces there. I'm going to transfer that over to the other side like we've been doing. And use this again to show us where to stop our cuts. Right there, right there. All right, how about that? deeper. We don't want to fitting, so we'll go a little deeper. All right. I think we'll wait on the chiseling until we cut this side here. And I'm going to need to transfer my lines over a little bit. Looks like. There we go. Already got one on there. Transfer the other one. All right. last guy. Good. Let's see. We are chiseling. Right there. And right there. Came right out. This is why it's also a good idea to wear safety glasses too. Not so much for wood flying, but for hitting metal against metal. You can get metal chips. Yep. Alright, see how we did. These are notches, and so we did this correctly. We have two interlocking pieces, but now we have the added bonus of a charger, place for a charger, so that tablet or that phone sits right in here. You should be able to put that charging cord right up through there and keep it charged while you're using it. Pretty simple design. Again, sand it, put some finish on it. The reason you want to put finish on it is you want to protect the wood. It's not going to be out in the elements or anything, but you want to protect it from dirt and grime and oil from your hands. So anything will be good. You could paint it. You could put some polyurethane or varnish on it. You could just put a stain on it. Anything you happen to have, you can paint it. You can decorate it, make it look like a nice art project if you want. Make a good gift too for somebody. We got a few things coming up. We got Mother's Day coming up, Father's Day after that. So hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm also going to be, periodically putting up other instructional videos as well. So stay tuned. Thank you.